Hello, this is FRJ Racing back with another advanced building techniques for MACHINECRAFT. And in this one, we'll be working with these bodies and couplings, and also some very advanced grouping. But before we start, let's just go to setup. I've done it in my first video, but I figured, we're 3 videos in, let's just do it again. So you go to your options. You got your common keys, make sure you know those. Preview machine is definitely very important. I talk about this in other videos, but it lets you actually see everything generated as is when you start the game, and that'll be very important for the topics today. Let's see if there's advanced mode, because I know they've done some updates since I've actually looked at this. So expert mode, have that on. Have this interval for backing up or actually saving your stuff. Optional. Need this on, have it like this. This is how I like to have it. In this is really annoying in my opinion. Every time you hit the undo button, it resets the camera back to like where it starts, as opposed to this, it just keeps the camera where it is. It's just a personal preference. All these, they take a lot of time, and you can do it by, I have a video on this, so you can just do it by clicking and using the shortcuts. But let's take a look at what we have here. As you can see, I have a V6 that is completely operational. Now right now it's run by a little motor in the back of it, but it's going to be super real by actually having the thrusters timed to the appropriate interval. I haven't taken the time to do that since it's a V6. I've had it work for an inline 4, but since I don't have that anymore, I think I deleted it. It might be laying around here somewhere, but I don't have the time to scrape it up. And then back here is a differential. So sometimes it locks up because there's too many physics calculations going on. As you can see, it gets a little crazy. But the gist of this is all this is possible with the actual grouping and couplers. Now let's see if I can find the video I have on the working differentials, just so you can see how it works. I have it laying around right here. So as you can see, it's the same differentials, but with the big videos and stuff. You can actually see it work here. Driven by one motor, which has a coupler driving the center differential, which then drives the 2 shafts. Alright, so back to this. How do we do all this? This is a lot of advanced stuff, and I know it's just throwing you kind of like right at it, but that's how it all works. So let's actually build something new and do some step-by-step. I don't know about another motor, because the motor did take quite a long time to do, so to fit it within a short, concise video, we'll just do something like a single cylinder mower engine. And also the couplers kind of give you an opportunity to have another set of bodies oriented in another way. As you can see, this entire motor is slanted 45 degrees, and it allows you to do some very interesting things. So I'll show you how that looks just in this actual space. You can see that the motor is completely separate, and it has a whole lot of couplers and the way it's laid out, but then it's joined to the actual chassis by one coupler. And the way you do it is you actually paint it. You don't use setup, you use paint, and then you choose a color. In this case it's green, and then it'll do that. Then you go to setup. See how the coupler positions all 0 there. However, on this one should be 45 degree on that Z axis, which is along the axis that you want to rotate it on. So in this case, since I wanted to rotate it 45 degrees, I had to do it on that along that blue line, because it's, if you were to draw a circle on this plane, it'd be sticking out of it. So then that number indicates the angle at which this will rotate, and then when you hit Z, the preview button, which I talked about, it all goes together and it all snaps into one place. So then you can see things before and after. Now let's go right into the building of just a single cylinder piston engine. Let's see if I can get out of here. So in this case, let's just have a core. Sorry if I'm a little nasally, I'm kind of sick, but I figured it's a good day, it's raining out, and I have plenty of time to put the video together for you guys, so let's get a couple blocks going. Of course, you can kind of do your own thing and kind of just get the simple principles of it, so not trying to make a beautiful piece of work, just trying to have this so you can actually watch it in one sitting. Now in this case you can use a rotator speed. It's kind of my, with all the dynamic models I make, you want to use the rotator S because it can do a couple things. It can also impart a force, but it can also be free spinning. Now the angle one is very important for a later discussion for suspension systems, because you can actually put a spring on it and a damper, which you can kind of do with the speed one, but it's really effective with the rotator A. I've had better luck with setting it up, and it's more intuitive with how it's laid out. However, the rotator will mainly be used in this system since it's always moving, and it might have a state where it's either free spinning or it's imparting a force, depending on what we want to do. So let's see if we can just get a simple crankshaft going. Now you'll see why this will be very important for the free spinning, for the rod to actually work as we want it to. Now this has too much of a stroke, so we'll make this very tiny. Now, I know I'm going kind of quick here, so I really advise to kind of go through my first two videos, because, you know, middle clicking and selecting things, just generally you want to be able to do that thoroughly before you watch this video, because this is a very advanced build, so I don't want to be wasting time reteaching those subjects. If you have any questions on them, just check out the first two videos for on my channel. Alright, now this is where grouping will be very important, and let me just make a little base so this all works. Alright, so we want this crankshaft to spin. However, right now it looks like it's going to collide and connect with the base, even though they're the same color. But we can go over the grouping here, 5 in my case, hit Q, and then let's select another group. Now right now, I know they're still white, but currently we're looking at group colorings. So anytime you got something painted, here I'll just paint it a color, just so you can see the difference, so you're not confused. Yeah. Alright, I just painted it all. Right click. So, as you can see, the actual view versus group view changes. Alright, so when you're in group view, we don't want the bottom base to collide with the crankshaft, but we also want it to rotate. So the rule of thumb with how grouping usually works is anytime you have a connector, which is any of these, the top 6, anytime you have some kind of connector linking two bodies, which is a set of blocks, you can change the group on it and they won't touch or affect each other. Now if I have these blocks right next to each other and they're of a different group, they will not interact with each other depending on how you have that group set. So let me first group a set of these to the green group, and I'll explain what this will do once I have it all kind of laid out. Now that I've done these first few, I should be able to right click and it should do the rest of the bodies up until it gets the connector. See that? And then, so this is what will happen now. This can now rotate whenever I set it up to actually go around. However, it can still collide with these blocks, it just won't be connected to them. So let's just set up this motor so you can see that work right now. Now it's going to be really crazy because there's some other parts of our setup that aren't done yet. However, let's put just a slow motor on this, and then a free spinning on the other side. So you just put a the neutral, you bring it all the way down, and then you scroll down free. Now remember in my setup in the beginning of the game, in the video, I said have the scroll wheel enabled and all that stuff. That's what determines this feature. So that's just by scrolling. So free will do that. Middle click will mirror it to the other side, so that means it'll be stopped. So it's kind of like a break as opposed to being free spinning. So now we're going to just see what that does. And it is, there you go. See how everything kind of stays together. And it still kind of collides with it. You can see it's kind of not too happy about that, but it still works. It doesn't like it. And it actually says in the top left, dislocated warning, stuff like that. Now, if I wanted that grouped to still work how I want it, like how we just showed, but I want it to not collide, I have it on a dummy. It says never collide with everything. So these are still green, and they'll always connect to the green grouped blocks, and they'll always be there, but they won't collide with everything now. So now you can go back in test mode, and we'll just have that do its thing. Now notice it doesn't even collide with the ground because of how I have it set up, which is a little crazy because the end pieces do, but not the middle, so it even passes through the ground perfectly fine. Now let me regroup it again. Let me select that. Now we have a foot. Now I'll show you what happens if I group something that's trying right next to another, but it's not connected to the core somehow by some means of grouping. These should not work, and actually let's see how it works. They should kind of fall off or not exist. Yeah, see how they just don't spawn? That's because they weren't linked to the core in some way without changing groups, so they technically don't actually connect to the body at all, or to the machine. So let's just fix that real quick, and now you get the gist of grouping. Now this is where it gets fun. This has to have two free spinning joints right here and here, so that the rod can rotate. And here we'll get to see how that works real quick. Now that they're free spinning, there you go. And eventually it should fall over. And there you go. So it works very good for how it is. But now, what tends to happen in this situation, because most crankshafts are connected through some kind of, rod that goes all the way through, and then a journal bearing around it, or some kind of bearing in general. This is two free couplings. So what that means is, if you have enough, if it's too locked up or there's too much weight on this part of the crankshaft and this part of the crankshaft can actually like rotate differently, and it can bind up and it just becomes a mess. So how do we fix that? There's a couple different ways, and I addressed it on one of my other builds, and we'll go back to that real quick. So if we look at the engine here, notice how I made kind of a support beam. Now these are still in the white grouping. We can go to the grouping here, and they're still part of the crankshaft, which is this weird, yellowish, but they're also non-colliding, so they never touch the pistons or anything on top and bottom dead center and other things. So it allows for a little more stiffness in the crankshaft without any play, especially if you have a really tall stroke, which is the distance from the center line to the actual end of the crankshaft. Your tire stroke will be pretty much diameter of what you got going on there. So going on back to the single piston, now we're going to make a cylinder head. Now in this case, you don't really want to mirror stuff, especially if you get like a more advanced motor going, because once you start mirroring things, it becomes a whole mess of the joints getting messed up, or you have to reconfigure everything. And I like to build everything step by step, part by part, because yeah. And if you end up needing to mirror something, I usually build all the mirroring parts first. So that's just a matter of how my workflow is. Well, see, all of this will just be the same color right now, but we're going to be grouping it in a bit, so this is just for the sake of what we got going on here. Now, let me just group these real quick so you can see what my actual plan is. The piston will be a totally separate group, so let's get a 3 going. Will be the piston, and we want a collidable one so it can slide within the cylinder, because if you can't collide with anything, then that's no good. Make sure you can see all the levels that you're on. So yep, and then if you select a block that's grouped, then look, this middle click, go over the group. Now I'm looking at a blue group, and then if I look at this one, so group 3. So don't trust that. It can be inconsistent. So when I did that, when I selected that blue grouped block, it ended up being blue. So let's see if that works for this. Sometimes the updates throw it off, so I'm sorry I haven't really thoroughly played since that. Okay, it still works. We want the depth of this cylinder to be a little, like 1 block more than the stroke, which is a total of 5. So it would go from here to here, so it's 5 blocks high. So that means this cylinder has to be 5 blocks high as well. So then I just make a skirt. That'll do its thing. And I make it 6, because right now this is at bottom dead center. So Actually, I should have made it above this. That was my fault. So from the top of the cylinder, it has to go up 5. Now this isn't. Now this is 5 from the lowest point on the cylinder. So if you look at this, the cylinder is about 3 high, and that means the bottom of the cylinder has to travel up 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Needs to go up 1 more, even though it's only 2 up from the top of the cylinder. So it's just something to consider for planning. And it'll be apparent once it's actually built and rotating. Now, I like to have my rod as a dummy group because I don't want it colliding with the piston in a weird way or any of the cylinder wall, so it's still white, the same group as the actual crankshaft. It's per preference. So the last thing to do now is to actually mate it up. And of course you want it so it can actually swing like an actual rod. And this one you have to set up the same way. Go to neutral, bring it down, make it free. So actually, as is, this should work. Make sure everything's there. Sometimes you group something and something gets kind of messed up. And test. There you go. And there's your working cylinder, 1-cylinder engine. Now, I was talking about timing with thrusters. Let's see if we can get that to work with one. Sometimes I'm unlucky with it, but we'll play around with it since we don't have to bounce a lot of motors. And then also while we're at it, we'll get this coupled with another thing. So once you can see how the coupler works, you can do a lot of stuff with it. Now, in this case, we're not going to have the motor run it at all. So we're going to make both of them free. Neutral, neutral. Okay, so then we'll put some thrusters on this. And actually, I'm going to put like a little starter on it. And make that turn right. And I'll of course explain to you when I'm actually using it, when I'm not, and hopefully it should be apparent. Because basically, so when I say plus hit the turn right button, which is D, it'll start to spin so I can bring it up to top dead center. And then I'll have the thruster set for forward so that the thrustles will actually get it going. And we can make a flywheel because this will definitely need to keep some inertia going for the second cycle to start. That's how an actual engine needs it to go, so hopefully this works the same way. Sometimes it's still game and it's not exactly real, but I like to make things pretty realistic because it's just how I like to do it. And make sure these are part of the blue group or you're going to be done for. You're going to be not happy when you find out your thrusters are all disappeared. Now they do kind of act as a coupler in a way, so they can be grouped differently. I believe I just I like to have them grouped to whatever they're connected to. So we're gonna have move forward, and we're gonna turn these down because I have them all on there, so we're not gonna need them all set to high. And then we're gonna put an interval on this. This is alright. I kind of took a break there and tried to figure out the thrusters, and I finally am on to something. So basically how you have to do it is you have your function, then you have a delay, and then you have a turning off function, and then you have another delay, and then so that will have the whole loop that I was talking about before. So when you do this, when you set up a thruster, you have to have both the on and off state. It's not just delay on, because there's a delay in between an off and an on section. And this is also your duration of the thrust, which should be very short and very high. And then there's a delay for the rotation. Now I'll show you how far I got with adding a crankshaft and a flywheel with just one, but it's still, I gotta play with it to get it running, and at that I still have to do it manually. So here I'll get it to top dead center and then start. Yeah, and you gotta get it going in the right place. So there you go. Hold on. Alright. Yep. But as you can see, it's still a pain. There you go. So that's just the trouble of having the correct amount of mass and amount of timing that you got on this in stroke. So with this small of an engine, it just can't run. It's kind of like most little mower engines. So let's make this 2-cylinder and make it a little bit easier. Now I'll also show you how significant the flywheel is. So I'm going to take this coupler off, and you'll see what it does now. It doesn't even stay rotating, as you can see. It just stops there at the bottom. Doesn't even continue because it has no inertia. It has no inertial mass. So this is why your actual engine has a flywheel, for this very reason. Is it just it doesn't keep the rotating force going, so they can continue on to the next stroke. So there's a little lesson in that. Now, how did I make this flywheel work? Let's see if I can go into this. So there's a coupler, and then there's another free joint, and then these are grouped. Actually, this is not even grouped, so this does not have another joint on it. It's just a floating block, and then the coupler here, you can, let's place that coupler in the right spot. Make sure your axes are in the right place. And then one is remote and one is not. And then what you should get from there is a linked body, and it's linked where that block is now missing, and that coupler is actually now part of this, and all that crankshaft is now part of that flywheel. So as you can see here, a bigger difference with the actual mass it has to have. and you almost get an entire spin going. So yep, there's a little lesson in couplers. Let's try to get some. Alright. Yeah, fortunately I can't keep this running with just one cylinder. So let's continue on the same design, and this time let's actually link together the crankshafts. So let's move the core. Let's remove this. Now with having two of these cylinders, this linked section, now I discussed it earlier, but we do really need the brace so that this can transmit power across the entire crankshaft. And then when you do that, since these are the same group, they'll collide, so now this has to be a different group. So you definitely need to make sure your grouping is correct, or it's not going to work at all. And actually this should be no collide, as I discussed earlier, just for preference. Definitely helps if you want to make these things a little more compact, but for the most part I'm making them pretty huge, as you can see here. I'm trying to actually think how far apart I want these things. I think it's just like so. Now you also have to know what bottom and top dead center are going to look like, or else you'll have a conflicting set of pistons going on here. What's nice is once the cylinder walls are made, it'll be pretty straightforward after that. Now what I'm checking right now is yeah, we're having some binding right now. Something happened. Oh, my drive, I deleted the drive gear, so let's fix that. So as you can see, the piston sticks up one block past the cylinder. So we'll make since it's built in bottom dead center, we have to consider this one's going to be at top dead center. So and then it's the same amount, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright. And then we just build the cylinder up. I think the piston needs to be 3 high. Yeah. 4, yeah. There you go. That'll do it. That's 2, and then that's 3. Because the other piston had a height of 3, so this one does 2. Now these will have to be set up a little bit different because they're offset, even though they have the same timing. So let's see if I can put a delay on here. That's what I was talking about earlier. So everything's gonna have to be moved down one. So 16, 0, 760. So it turns out that your setup, I just mirrored, or I flipped the delay. So 0, 80, 100, 1, and then this one should flip. Yeah, now it starts with 100, now it has a 1, 0, and then 80. So it's yep, and then it'll do that. So that's the firing order. So your 1 still happens after the in between 1 and 100. As you can see, it's just been offset 1. See, 100, 1, 0, 80, whereas this has all been moved up, and then the delay moved again. So it's actually been moved 2 spots up. As you can see, this would be here, and then this would be down here. So then I'll show you how it goes. Alright, and there it goes. It's not smooth. Now of course that can be achieved with more cylinders, and if you know how to do some timing, then you can eventually have a 6-cylinder like I have. So I'll probably get my 6-cylinder going in a later video, or sometime maybe you guys can see it. But now here's some interesting stuff we can do. How do we make a clutch or something to have this drive another body? Well, let's see what we can do about that. And here's how I would do it. Let's say this is our drive shaft. It's very simple, of course. There's not going to be anything to it, but we need something that can support the actual body, and we're going to use couplers. So let's use this as a free coupler, and then so that'll be like neutral, and then let's say turn left will be to engage it, and what that'll do is set a damper, but I don't want to set an active damper because that'll be a pain. So let's just have it either on or off. So basically it'll be either free spinning or totally locked up. And then we're going to put a body on this. So we're going to take this, paint it another color, alright, so now it's going to be a different group. Let's get another color besides that. Make it red. Now, you can have a whole lot of these, but I can just warn you now that it'll become very, very, it won't behave well, let's just say that. Now, technically this can just float in space, but for the sake of realism, let's not have this locked up. So you can see here this will be totally neutral, and it shouldn't have any drive to it. Alright, and then this needs to be set to remote, or else it'll snap. If you don't do that, the coupler will, like, this will go to here. So like if I didn't have this whole 2 separate constraints, then this would do some weird stuff, and it would try to join that body, like this go into that, and whatever's connected to it will move to there. I'll just show you an example of what I'm going on about, because it's kind of crazy looking when you see it. Alright, so if we do the preview, it should, yeah, it either disappears or goes completely nuts. But Yep, see how it is. There you go. Check that out. So I'm going to have it in neutral, and then I'm going to hit the left button, and there you go. And now I'm going to let it off, and it free spins again. And then it goes back to being like a clutch. Now it's just floating there, right? Let's change that from remote to not remote. So we'll go to setup here and uncheck that. And now it should snap to it. Yep, see how it's actually part of that body now? And it still acts the same. So clutch disengaged, engaged. So for this, if I actually had it part of, let's make this remote before, because it goes crazy if you don't set it up right. And through the same means you should be able to have the same effect without it floating there, just for the sake of what it looks like. But now it's not linking up, which is odd. Huh. I think they updated it so you can't do this. So you're just gonna have to keep it there for the sake of what it is. There you go. And there's your guide to groups, couplers, and a little bit of advanced timing, and how to make a small engine with a clutch. And there you go. Have a good one.